Okay, we're live
One
on
of your
X.
streaming destinations got disconnected. Go to settings. I think that's fine.
Which one was it? Is that LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, for some reason that wasn't working. All right, well, I think we're live on X. It looks like we're live on YouTube and on Riverside as well. So, everybody, welcome. Oh, what, Alvaro?
Hold on 1 second. I'm hearing a 2 second delay,
Okay.
which makes for a great guys and dolls echo effect.
Like call and response. Like, are we doing
Yes.
musical references at
I got the
7:45?
horse right here. His name is Paul Revere. Da, 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 da. Can do, can do. This guy says the horse can do. All right.
I've been watching.
I'm gonna
a
log
ton
off and come back on. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Sorry, folks, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties this morning here. But welcome to the fair fight with Alvaro and Max. Right now, just with Max. Alvaro will be with us shortly here. Yeah, it was funny. We were just doing a little guys and dolls dancing, and I was going to say I've been watching recently. Some of it's called Somebody Feed Phil. It's a travel show where he goes around and he eats at different cities around the world, but he's got this just wonderful way of doing a little happy dance when he eats something that's good. All right, you're back.
I am back. I figured out the problem. It was on my side. Apologies. I hope folks enjoyed that brief guys and dolls in this world of darkness.
I was telling them about the Phil Rosenthal and Somebody Feed Phil. It's a show that Amanda and I have been watching recently.
Oh yeah.
But he does I love that when he eats something he likes, he just does a little happy dance.
The eating dance is like one of the great new things of our society, I think. And when little kids do it, I could watch that for hours.
Oh, it's just so when there's so much darkness. Yes. In this world, to kind of, and I love how he just recognizes it's the beauty of humanity.
Yes.
Is in our diversity, right?
Yeah.
And when food gets diverse influences, it becomes better. It becomes something new and wonderful. So, anyway, that's just been a little treat for the last few weeks. All right, so I already said welcome to the fair fight while you were off screen, Alvaro. So we got a good show today, I think, just a little live chat. We talked about this a little bit on our last show 3 weeks ago, our last live appearance, where, it seems that, well, Alvaro, before we get started in the topic, I think you've got a few things that you want to tell us.
So, as folks start logging on, there's a couple things I want to flag. So for those of you joining, Max and I are developing a show called The Fair Fight with Alvaro and Max that looks at the world not through this ever-present lens of left versus right, but focuses on how the money at the top is hurting all of us underneath. And we are cutting some pilots for that show. It's loosely modeled off of Click and Clack, the Tapper Brothers, and Car Talk, where you'd call in with your questions about your cars, and they would roast you for a little while, and then they would give you answers. The first episode that's being put together right now is about surveillance at work. But as folks join, I will share that one of the next episodes that we're cutting, I'm really excited about. And so, Max, I don't know if you can throw up the information about our episode with Jenny Radesky. So real quick, we're approaching Valentine's Day, and one of the strangest things about living in 2026 is that a lot of people think they are in relationships with AI chatbots. And the fact of the matter is that, of course, they are not in those relationships. And the problem is that a lot of those people are kids and teens. And instead of developing relationships IRL, they are developing these relationships with Character AI, with Replica, with ChatGPT, with these other chatbots that are supplanting their real-life relationships. And so in addition to the trends of social media addiction, you now have this thing going on. And there's some horrific stories about suicidal ideation, some kids actually taking their lives. And I know as a parent, my kids aren't quite yet at that age where they start using social media and heaven forbid these chatbots or developing relationships with them. But I know I have a gazillion questions. And so what we have arranged for one of these pilots that we're cutting is for one of the nation's leading development experts, pediatrician Dr. Jenny Radesky, to answer your questions about how chatbots, social media is affecting your kids and teens. And so if you are a mom, if you're a dad, you have a question, is this good for my kid? Is this bad for my kid? What should I do? Right? You should send those questions in. You can call, Max is getting excited, 920-WE-FIGHT. That is 920-933-4448. Leave us a voicemail there. Or you can submit it through, record it at thefairfightpod.com. There's an easy way. You just click a button, record your question. And Dr. Radesky is going to answer as many of those questions as she can. And so we will push this again at the end of this episode. But again, you're a mom, you're a dad, you have questions about how, what to do about your son, your daughter, having these extended times on social media, extended times with these chatbots, thinking their boyfriend, their girlfriend is a chatbot. This is a real thing, folks. Thinking they have sexual relationships with these chatbots. Again, this is a real thing. Send those questions in. We will get those questions answered by one of the country's foremost development experts, Dr. Jenny Radesky of the University of Michigan. So that's something that I want folks to start submitting questions for.
And in addition to calling 920-WE-FIGHT, I'm really proud.
You got to give
really
the number afterwards, though.
I got to go 920-WE-FIGHT. No, and it's every cell phone has all those digits. You remember like back when we were kids, Alvaro, and everything was like 1-800. Call us, and so it's amazing when this upcoming episode that we're trying to do on kids and social media, kids and the internet. Because I don't know what you've experienced with your kids, Alvaro, but I feel like I'm in a constant fight against addiction. To games, to different. And the thing is, it's so easy as a parent to be focused on all the other things that we have to do, right? Like cooking dinner, doing laundry, taking care of making the house running. And so our kids kind of just get their device and start, and before they know it, they've been on it for an hour and a half. And I feel like it's just constantly, trying to keep them off doing other things. But tell me about your week, Alvaro. How have you been? I know you guys on the East Coast, you've been shut down basically, haven't you?
Yeah. So as we get folks to log on, we are in not day 1, not day 2, not day 3, not day 4, but day 5 of every single public school in Montgomery County, Maryland, being shut down due to this snowstorm. And it's
how many inches did you all get? Because I'm out here in Iowa where we regularly get like 6-7 inches of snow.
We're not Iowa, man.
I know. Well,
we're not Minnesota either. We're Maryland, and we got 8 inches or so of like powder. But then this thing that people, I will give one thing to the people of the DMV. They give great names to these snowstorms. So, 15 years ago there was snowpocalypse and snowmageddon for the names of these snowstorms, and now there's a new term called snowcrete, which is so basically there's this thick layer of ice that's just like solid, like refrigerator ice on top of this snow. So unless you have a metal snow shovel. And like literally I was out there with a hammer breaking up this ice to get
get a chisel.
I actually will get a chisel because there's a patch of ice that's not getting on there. But yeah, man. So day 5 of no school. Day 5 of no school. And so I added it up last night as I was about to go to bed. We have since December 23rd, I think we've had, it is now January 30th, I think we've had 14 days of school is what we've had since December 23rd. Yeah.
What's been going on out there? Like, are they just having difficulty getting the snow plowed just because of the nature of that snow, the snowcrete?
Yeah, basically, so like you can't remove this stuff off the sidewalks without dedicated, actually just slamming away at this stuff. And then the other thing is Montgomery County, like a lot of these, exurbs of, part of this is just suburbs of DC, but I kind of live in the exurbs. I'm outside of the Beltway. And you go further up, there's some truly rural parts of the county. And so, it's a big school district, and so that's what's leading this.
It's
There's
just
still
the
some stuff
buses can't get up.
the buses can't get in and out. There's no sidewalk to stand on, so that's kind of what's happening.
I mean, you guys got to toughen up, man. With climate change, like those of us out in the Midwest, like we know how to. We'll have like 6-7 inches of snow, and maybe we'll get like a 2-hour delay. But it's like get those kids into school.
Upstate New York was the same way. Like I still remember. I still remember going to school, and like my mom would be in our like station wagon, and we would literally just be skating around, skating around the road. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But should we get started talking about?
Well,
go ahead. Tell me.
I wanted to tell you a little because it's funny. Also with weather, Amanda and I, we went to the Iowa State basketball game last night. This was actually my Christmas present. Is she knows that I enjoy live sports, so she got me tickets to go. It was Iowa State versus Colorado. Iowa State just destroyed Colorado. It's pretty great.
That's awesome.
But I got to tell you, I'm a lucky guy when it comes to college sports this year because in basketball, my 3 teams that I follow are Nebraska, where my parents went.
Yeah.
They were until this week were undefeated. They're top 5 team in the country.
Yeah.
Florida, who won the national championship last year, and they're going on gangbusters. And then Iowa State. Like if I'm cheering for an Iowa team, it's going to be Iowa State. And it looks like all 3 of them are potential like Elite 8 teams this year.
Is that right?
So, yeah.
Remind me your connection to Nebraska, Max. I always
my parents went. My parents went to Nebraska. Well, my parents grew up in Nebraska City, Nebraska, the home of Arbor Day. I don't know if I've told you this before, but my grandparents ran a bowling alley in Nebraska City for like 50 years.
How did I not know this?
Yeah, no, I'm from bowling. So my dad was on the University of Nebraska bowling team.
That's awesome.
So it's like
my kids are budding Wii bowlers, just so you know. Like
that's a great game.
My son just crushes it on Wii Bowling. On like OG 15 years ago Wii Bowling with that really peaceful music in the background, like da, 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 da. I mean, I will say that is like Nintendo does game music right. Like it is. I could leave that stuff on in the background and just chill myself out in a dark time such as the one we live in. But that's awesome.
But from the light music to the very dark
from
topic.
The Nintendo Wii Bowling music to this
the transition to the Deportation Industrial Complex.
Yeah.
So, Alvaro, why don't you get us started?
Yeah.
What is the Deportation Industrial Complex?
So, look, that's a big word that me and Max came up with to describe the fact that what you are seeing on the street, folks, isn't just brutal. It is also big business. And I don't mean big business like $100 million business, $1 billion business. I mean a $170 billion business. Just this morning, last night, the Financial Times came out with an essay pointing out that $22 billion is flowing into the private sector as a result of this ramp up of mass deportations from ICE and CBP. And so, and by the way, that's just the start because there's $170 billion thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that is going to be flowing into the coffers of the private sector and some government agencies, some state and local agencies that Max and I want to talk about today because you're going to hear elsewhere about, and we're going to talk about the horrors of what's happening on the streets of Minneapolis. But I don't think you're hearing enough about how people are getting rich, about the scope of the ICE dragnet in terms of the technology being used, and how, Palantir, people know about Palantir. Palantir leans into that bad boy, persona of like, we do the tough jobs that no one wants to talk about, like the few good men, you don't want to know the truth type stuff. But there's all these boring businesses.
They understood that was like the villain. right?
Yeah, they
And
lean
in
into
A Few
it.
Good Men.
They lean into it.
Yeah.
Well, no, they lean into it. They go for it. But like, what I want people to walk out of this live, I don't know if it's the right metaphor, but what I want people to understand is that, yeah, Palantir sews together the data, at the end that helps ICE and CBP do what they're doing. But all these boring businesses that you have heard of, that you interact with on a nearly daily basis or hear about, businesses like Deloitte, this business consulting firm, businesses like LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, any lawyer, we got a whole lot of lawyer friends. I suspect maybe a plurality of people listening to this are lawyers. The companies you use for legal research are involved in creating the databases that ICE uses. And lastly, companies. So I worked for 5 years for the people of Minnesota. I worked for Al Franken, Senator Franken, for 5 years. 3M, which a lot of people don't know, stood for Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, openly supported the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So today we're going to talk about the big business of those deportations and how these boring businesses are helping ICE do what it does. Okay, and so that's what we want to talk about today. So real quick, let's start with the scope of ICE's reach into our lives and the money that we know is flowing into these companies that ICE pays for to surveil the American people. And so the first thing right off the bat I want to point out is it's obviously true that ICE is targeting not just the quote unquote bad hombres, the violent criminals, that Donald Trump said he was going to
he said
go after.
hombres.
I mean, yeah, we forget this stuff.
Totally.
But they have a dragnet that includes, the driver's license data of 3 in 4 adults. They can access that data. Often they can run face recognition on that data. They can find you through your utility records. 3 in 4 adults. Okay, they can find you through your utility records. And they can track people's driving. You can track your movements for 3 and 4 adults in cities home to 3 or 4 adults. So just let me take a step back. ICE can track your driving for cities that are home to 3 and 4 adults in this country. So where you drive, where you live, your face, all of this stuff is stuff that ICE had access to 5 years ago. So they have even more of this stuff. And if I could, I just want to walk people through one of those paths of data. So, and actually, Max, could you throw up A1?
Yep. A1 or A0?
A1. Okay. So all of this, by the way, is from a wonderful report that I am biased because I built a team that wrote it. It's called American Dragnet, and you can access it at americandragnet.org. It's from 2022. And why am I talking about a 2022 report in 2026? Because I know the work that went into this, and I know that I's were dotted, T's were crossed, and this is a conservative look at just one part of the ICE vendor ecosystem. And so, again, I want you to look at this and understand this is just a historical look at part of the spending, but I want people to understand these trends. Okay, so again, americandragnet.org. It was the result of FOIAs. It was a result of we trawled through ICE's contracts, both by hand, and then this is my favorite, Max. We had someone who trained an AI to detect these surveillance contracts, and it surfaced them, and then we verified them. This is how we got this data. But what I want to point out is the trend line and also the amounts of money that were involved in the last administration. So to be really clear, I am talking about stuff that happened during Obama, during Trump 1, and then during the start of Biden. Okay? And so what you see is like $1.2 billion being spent on geolocation technology over this period. You see all sorts of money being spent on hold on a second, I lost you there. On
you lost me?
No. I don't worry about it.
Okay.
On data brokers, on government databases, on wiretapping, on data analysis. And let me just tease out one of these streams. And so you have here like $2 billion. You see how the trend line goes up. I promise you, and we know from the Financial Times reporting from last night, the trend line just explodes, right? And so let's talk about how ICE finds people through your electricity bill, your water bill, etc.
Can I
please jump in
before you go? Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, if you could go to A2 and then get in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to. Okay, so something I was involved in when I was with Skadden Arps that I've always regretted and really hated that I did it. There was an amicus brief that I filed with Mike Scudder, who is now on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, in the U.S. v. Jones case. Do you know U.S. v. Jones?
Oh, well,
Mr. Privacy
tell
Man.
people what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mr.
U.S. v.
Privacy,
Jones.
yes.
It was. I didn't know that we had this connection, but
I didn't know either.
Yeah, no, and I did a lot of the research on that, but this idea, the idea that it is not an invasion of privacy, to have aggregated public information, and it always reminds me of an anecdote. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, when Antonin Scalia was sitting and saying, "Oh, really, this isn't an invasion of privacy. Like, if the government takes all these public pieces of information and puts it together about who you are as a person, you don't have a reasonable expectation in privacy in that aggregation of information." And then a couple of law students who were listening to it at the time were like, "Okay, well, if that's the case, Mr. Scalia, we're going to pull together all the public information about you and put it out there." And they did, and he threw a shit fit, and it's like, and I think it's like this total cognitive dissonance that people have, that it's like, oh, it's perfectly fine for us to pull all this together to put it, but nobody wants that kind of dossier on them existing out there. So anyway, people should look up US v. Jones and the effect of that on this kind of dragnet capability.
And that's what it is. And so if you throw up A2, I want to make this really clear, because you're good. Because some people think that, like, oh, ICE, if I I'm on the right side of the law, if I'm not an immigrant, if my papers are right, ICE doesn't really have anything to do with me. And this could not be further from the truth. And so and I don't know if you can maximize that or blow that up so people can see this a little bit better, but it's okay if you can't. No worries. So
maybe there's a way, but I'm not technically advanced.
That's okay. If you take your screen and you just go like this, you just go like that. Not you, but the people listening. You'll see. So, like, here's the thing about ICE surveillance. So for a while they just used criminal databases, but then they wanted to find everyone. Oh, you're doing it, man.
Yeah.
And so what started to happen is, so let's say you wanted to be off ICE's radar. Well, actually, no. What started to happen is credit reporting agencies started lobbying for utility bills to be included in credit reports. And what they said was that this will help us, create data on working people who may not be spending a lot in other places, but who, pay their bills. And we know them to be paying their bills, right? And so this started getting added to credit reports. But what then started happening is that these credit reports started being fed into LexisNexis and then Thomson Reuters, and marketed to law enforcement agencies as a way to find hard-to-find people. And so just think about this for a second. Let's say you are undocumented, and let's say you're not keen to be represented on any database, and so you keep you stay off the grid, right? But you need water, you need electricity, you need heat, right? And so these companies take advantage of the fact that you need water, you need electricity, you need heat to affirmatively feed all this information into these databases, which are then sold to ICE, right? And if people are wondering, I thought this was Palantir, I didn't know it was these boring companies like Equifax, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis. What Palantir does is stitch all of this data up at the top, but the way, like, the path of that data to Palantir is through some boring companies that you probably have heard of or may use on a daily basis, that And as a result of this pipeline of data, ICE can find basically anyone at a moment's notice. No warrant, no subpoena even. They can just locate you. And that's the other thing is you might say, well, I want them finding people who they're not trying to find. And guess what? They can do that, right? With a few, it is very easy to get subpoenas and warrants out the door for truly violent offenders or, criminal offenders. But that's not what this is. This is a much broader dragnet that encompasses basically everyone based on your water, electricity bill. Go ahead.
And remember that, we've been seeing these videos of like ICE agents, like being like taking the picture of a protester and saying, guess what? You're a domestic terrorist now.
Right.
I don't know if people are familiar with the NSPM7.
You should talk about it, what it is.
So there's every president is able to issue, it's called National Security Presidential Memoranda, right, which is essentially for priorities for the intelligence, community, for the government of what they're focused on. I think it's really interesting that NSPM7 is public, and we know what it says, and it basically identifies anybody with woke ideology, right, as being a potential national security threat. Very wishy-washy language that essentially allows them to basically identify anybody who has opposite political beliefs of those currently in power as being a national security threat. That's really scary. And what I'm really concerned about is that there is an NSPM 6, which is issued right before it, which is classified and confidential.
Huh. Wow.
So it's like, with it, if we know how awful the things are that they're putting out there publicly, can't imagine what's being, kept confidential.
Wow. And look, I would offer one last word on this chart and the report we've been talking about before we talk about Minneapolis and this CEO letter. Everyone should know something that happened in the Trump administration, which is a lot of work was done to offer people a free way to file their taxes, okay, and under the prior administration. And one of the first things that this administration did was shut that down. No one benefits from that except the TurboTaxes and H&R Blocks of the world. No one benefits from there not being a free way to file, easy way to file through IRS other than these companies. And what that is a product of is these companies just say, well, I want mine. I want mine. I want my money to keep on flowing, and so make it harder for everyone else. And so what I want to point out to everyone is like, this is 5 years ago, and there was $97 million flowing to data brokers like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis. You can bet your bottom dollar that is 4 or 5 times larger today. These boring companies are going to lobby for that money to keep flowing. And so whatever you see, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer negotiating, you need to understand that these companies are going to be doggedly working behind the scenes to say, well, actually, keep our contracts live. We're not the bad guys. We're not there out there on the streets. And so for the first time,
they absolutely are the bad guys.
For the first time, you have a consensus among people on the left and a heck of a lot of independents and some people on the right that this agency is out of control. But what DC is going to DC, and these lobbyists for these companies that make a pretty penny off of ICE surveillance and ICE mobilization and ICE's and CBP's brutality are going to lobby for them to keep theirs. And so that is something people need to understand and watch for. It's not just Palantir, it's these boring companies, and they are going to lobby to keep those flows of money going.
That you mentioned the tax filing, and I don't think people are sufficiently angry about how awful that particular corporate handout was. I lived in Britain for a while. I didn't really have to file taxes in Britain. Because they would send me a little document that said, okay, this is your taxes this year. Like, we took this amount, from you. Here it is. This is your record. Basically, it's like, here's your tax return. What we get back from accountants or, from these, online, low discount tax filing services.
Yeah.
Britain, the government just provided it to you.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to, spend weeks putting all your stuff together. Anyway, moving on then to, this.
The CEO's letter. What is that letter? What happened? And
so the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, this was, I think it was right after Alex Preddy was murdered.
Yes.
Like, obviously the state of Minneapolis, or the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota, many people are angry about, ICE being on the streets, the way that they're conducting these raids, the way that they are, disrupting, you could say, like the peace and harmony of the state. And so a bunch of Minnesota corporations got together, and let's be, Minnesota is a very economically advanced state. Like,
yes.
I think Americans think it's just a bunch of people up ice fishing or whatever up there, but it's like, it has been. United Healthcare is based in the state of Minnesota. You mentioned 3M already, Land O'Lakes, Hormel. We've Winnebago. Alvaro, I just want to know, because earlier this week you told me it was a Minnesota company, and it is. Its headquarters are based in Minnesota now. But Winnebago, just so everyone knows, is named after Winnebago County in Iowa. It was started out as an Iowa company, but then moved to Minnesota. But anyway, this open letter from CEOs of large Minnesota-based companies and associations was sent out. And look, I'm not going to read the letter to you. You can go find it online. Suffice it to say, this is as weak sauce in the face of what is happening in the state of Minnesota that companies could do. And now maybe part of it is just that they had a bunch of companies that were like, we're just not sure how we want to do it. So they, we've all been through that. Alvaro, I know you've been through it, where it's like language gets watered down, so that everybody can kind of be on the same page and say the same thing. But what we thought was interesting was that David Dayen and the American Prospect, and I'm sorry, the second author on that article,
I think it was
Alvaro.
Courtney Curry Wimbish.
And
I think she was the lead
She's
author.
the lead.
Yes, Courtney Curry Wimbish,
They put out an excellent article this week noting what exactly these companies have done to bring about this surge in ICE funding.
And do you want to throw up the okay, got it, because right now we're still looking. There you go.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, there we go. Yep. So here are the signatories to the open letter. And in this particular graphic here, we have two circled. One is 3M and the other is Winnebago. And these two companies actively, publicly lobbied for the passage of One Big Beautiful Bill Act. In fact, these two companies had their endorsements of it posted on the White House website. As something that Trump trotted out. Now, it's funny, Alvaro, when you posted a more advanced one of this, I saw that somebody commented on your thing, and they said something to the effect of, "Oh, well, they weren't lobbying for the ICE funding." And I just want to point out that, my God, people.
Well, this is what trade associations are for. So people may not realize this, but the reason trade associations exist is for a group of companies to be able to lobby and push for certain positions that their name brand doesn't want to be associated with. And so basically what you're, go ahead.
Well, I just want to note, it's like, I don't care. I don't care if you did it for tax cuts. Right. If that was your primary motivation, because it's still evil.
Right.
It is evil to support something that causes evil to happen, even if you're doing it for a different reason. And, too many Americans, I think, have gotten to this point that they think it's like, oh, well, it's okay that I participate in evil because I'm only doing it for this reason over here. And it's called cognitive dissonance, right? Like that, it's like you support something that you know to be bad, but you do it because it's like you've got a self-interest on.
Yeah.
So I want to go to the next one here, which is, let's see here. Sorry for my technical amateurness here. B2. So now these, you had mentioned the trade organization.
Yeah.
So the first two, 3M and Winnebago, they were out there with their name being like, yeah, one big, beautiful bill. This is great.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah.
And then these in orange, they hid behind a trade association. Now, some of these were executive members of the trade association, meaning that they were directly involved with issuing the support for, one big, beautiful bill. Other ones were just, stated members, of the trade organization. So these companies have their hands dirty.
And can you read them, because there might be folks just listening?
Shoot, you're
okay.
absolutely.
Why don't you go to the next one, and then you can provide the summary of who's on the screen.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, apologies to those that are just listening here. We kind of have these mixed formats with the online video where people can see these graphics. So just so everybody knows what we're looking at that is listening here, we have a list of the companies that signed the open letter from the Minnesota business organizations.
Calling for de-escalation.
Calling for de-escalation. And so this, I'm going to actually go to the next one because it has everybody on it.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Why is it? Stop.
So what Max is calling up is this letter of Minnesota CEOs who I actually do think it's worthwhile while you call it up to quickly. Okay. The letter makes no mention of the killing of Alex Peretti. Instead, it uses this very milquetoast language to say, the recent challenges facing our state have created widespread disruption and tragic loss of life. It is, and it continues, and that's the kind of the strongest thing it says. While the streets of Minneapolis and Minnesota are being torn apart. But why don't you go ahead and talk about these companies, and then I'll offer some thoughts.
I'm going to list I've already mentioned 3M and Winnebago. Yep. So the ones that actually had trade organizations that they're members of or executive members of, you have Alliance, you have Boston Scientific, Hormel, of course, the very famous meat, processing company, Hormel, Medtronic, Lando Lakes, U.S. Bank Corp, Target, one of the most famous organizations in the state of Minnesota, Best Buy. Those were ones that actually had, those are circled in orange on our chart here. And then we have the boxes in blue around other companies, and that includes some such as Ecolab, General Mills, Excel Energy, Mayo Clinic is on there. These, and just so you know that the blue, what that is, are companies that had lobbying reports that they filed
around this bill.
That they had lobbied in support of it, but weren't making public statements in support of it, but they had hired individuals to go and meet with members of Congress to let them know that, hey, this company thinks it's great.
So the only wrinkle here is I actually don't think we know for a fact they lobbied in favor or against. The way those lobbying reports work. Okay. Yeah, the way those lobbying reports work is you just hired someone to get involved, which is why I think it's really good that they're in blue, right? Rather than red or one of those hot colors on there. But that said, if you're lobbying for something and you don't like what's in it, you usually find some way to activate your trade association or activate, some way to say, hey, we don't want this thing to move forward. And so let me offer a few thoughts. So I worked with Senator Franken for the people of Minnesota for 5 years. I interacted with so many executives from these companies. And honestly, I didn't become, personal friends with anyone, but I had really friendly relationships with the CEO, not the CEOs, but some C-suite executives at a bunch of these companies. 3M, I did a lot of work with on intellectual property. Tons of patents get churned out at 3M. Target, the Mayo Clinic, you name it. And what I want people to understand is that if there's any group of CEOs out there that could have taken a stance against what's happening on these streets, it is this group of Minnesota companies. And yet we get this. A milquetoast statement calling for de-escalation that doesn't recognize what anyone can see on the street, right? And I think a lot of people have this reaction of like disappointment, but I want to wash that away and instead say, this is a great clarifying moment. We need to stop waiting by the phone for these billionaire CEOs to call us. We need to get out of our dress, right, and walk away from the front door. You know, no one's coming to pick us up. No one's coming to save us, right? These billionaire companies are not going to save us. The people who are going to save you are your neighbor and your small business down the street. Because the delta between, the difference between these CEOs' inability to take a moral stance in the face of the horror of these shootings of unarmed people in Minneapolis, while the bookstore down the street, the donut shop, you know, the coffee shop, these places are being kitted out to be, you know, mutual aid centers where people collect to gather groceries to distribute to their neighbors. You know, they are taking public stances opposing this stuff. I saw a post. A friend of mine runs an aluminum company in Wisconsin, an aluminum manufacturing company in Wisconsin, issued this strong letter saying there can't be masked men in the streets of this country shooting unarmed people. All right? And so again, like, these billionaires are not going to save you. Stop being disappointed by them. The people who are going to save you are your neighbor and the small business down the street. And what I want, I'm not just saying this because I like the way it sounds. You had the top people in the party that you and I are both a part of, the Democratic Party. You had Vice President Harris say, when some of this stuff started happening, I was really disappointed in the titans of industry, right? And then you had former President Barack Obama say, you know, these billionaires really need to step up, you know, or these CEOs, corporate America really needs to step up. And this party that probably, you know, that a lot of people listening, you know, are a part of, needs to stop taking their cues from the billionaire class, needs to stop thinking that the billionaire class will somehow be a moral compass on any of these issues, and start listening.
You don't become a billionaire by having morality.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And say more about that. Like, how do you become a billionaire?
You know, it's like this idea, and this is where we've got a cultural problem in America, because we hold up on a pedestal people who essentially exhibit all of the qualities of a greedy, bad person.
Yeah.
You know, I've told you before, I'm getting a little more spiritual as I get older, and kind of thinking about morality and thinking about, you know, what is right and wrong. And I love the Bible passage that says it is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And I think that the Bible was telling us something there, which is like, do not trust, do not hold up on a pedestal anyone who has accumulated wealth. Because that essentially means that they have, you know, eschewed any responsibility for other people, that they have eschewed any responsibility to make things better for other people. And, you know, you said something that I want to contradict, because you said, you know, it's like, they're not coming to help us. But I think we need to realize that these companies that supported the One Big Beautiful Bill, that these companies who profit off of the dragnet state, the surveillance economy that we now have, it's not just that they're not coming to help us. They're actively working against us. They are actively working to undermine the freedom of the United States so that they can get a tax cut, so that they can make a little more money. And to me, that makes them the enemy. And I just like to note for everybody that, you know, in Minneapolis, they have called for a general strike, right? Today. Today is, you know, no school, no work, no spending money. And I think that that's the one that most people can actually partake in, right? Is to not spend money. And I just want to, you know, say, it's like, if we're not going to spend money, let's just make sure. You mentioned how some of these small businesses are, working together to try to
Yes.
provide relief to people.
Yes.
It's like you can spend your money, but spend it with your local community.
Spend it at a locally owned business.
But
And yeah, go
the
ahead.
least you can do is cancel your Prime membership, for crying
Right.
out loud.
And let me say, they're calling for a general strike, and there also a lot of people are starting to say February, don't log off of Prime, log off of Amazon, log off of ChatGPT, log off of don't buy any Apple products, during February. And let me say, I actually come at it a little different, and for me, it's an even stronger indictment. What I'm going to say, which is, you say they're actively working to undermine us, and absolutely, some companies are, right? You look at the Palantirs of the world, you look at the Deloittes of the world, they are making literal billions of dollars off of this mass deportation, this deportation industrial complex. But I think so many of these other companies are something much worse, which is they are indifferent. They are indifferent to the pain that they are facilitating, helping along, by endorsing this legislation that might throw them a tax cut here or there, that might throw them a contract here or there, but that
throw them deregulation, less
throw them
accountability,
deregulation,
less accountability for their actions.
but that makes the people that they call their customers completely miserable. I think indifference, is far worse because it's so much more pervasive. Then there are some companies that lean into that, I'm the bad guy, I'm the one who knocks, persona of Palantir, a little Breaking Bad reference, right? So like there is that narrow subset of companies, but I think so many of these other, billionaire companies are much worse in that they are indifferent to the well-being of the people they serve. And let me just reflect on how different this was on, on the way some of these executives saw themselves even 30, 40 years ago. 30, 40, 50 years ago, the difference between the lowest paid employee and the CEO of that company might be 100 times, right? Now it's like 1,000 times or 10,000 times. I remember when I was working for Franken, there was a staffer, Senator Franken, who lived in a town, in the exurbs of the cities of the Twin Cities, and we were driving through the super normal neighborhood. And Max, she pointed to this house, this super normal house. And she said, whose house that is, or that was? And I said, no, obviously not. And she said, that was the CEO of General Mills' house. And I was, and I mean, it may not be the General Mills CEO, but it was an example. One of these name brand, Best Buy, Target, one of these name brand Minnesota companies. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a normal house. And she said, exactly. Minnesota is a really egalitarian place. It has this beautiful aspect of its culture where people really care about their neighbor, and they look down upon these ostentatious displays of wealth, and the care for your neighbor that you're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis, because like you're seeing the people blowing the whistles, but you're not seeing are people who are driving around delivering groceries to their neighbors in sub-zero temperatures, right?
Did you see ICE is tracking people's
absolutely,
groceries
ICE is
now?
tracking them. Absolutely, ICE is tracking
yeah,
them.
that's like there is that they're actively
and so
following.
like that is a vestige of that egalitarianism, that fellow feeling for your neighbor. And like when I hear Vice President Vance say like, "Oh, this is a Minnesota specific response," like what I want people to know is that Minnesotans are generally non-confrontational to a fault.
Yeah.
Okay, like when people talk about Minnesota nice, the funny thing is that like, I came into the Franken office being like, Minnesota nice, and like all the Minnesotans were like, Alvaro, that's a joke about Minnesotans' passive aggressiveness, because like they won't actually get in an argument with you. They'll just be Minnesota nice to you. And so like you like what
I don't know about that, man.
Well, hold on. What they're seeing, this is not a diss on Minnesotans. This is what I'm actually saying is different. What I'm saying is like what you are seeing on the streets are a people who really care about their neighbor. You look at Minnesotans, their census participation rates, their voter participation rates, the things they don't need to do every day in their lives are number one in this country, right? And they do it because they care. What you're seeing aren't people who are out there to fight, right? Although some of them do feel like they need to defend their neighbor, absolutely, and more with these shootings, they're out there doing that. These are people who are out there who care. And the difference between, again, the people on the street, the people delivering groceries, the small businesses, the small retailers who are opening their doors to people delivering groceries, people tracking where ICE is going in these cities, could not be more different from this milquetoast response from the CEOs. And it's sad and embarrassing because Minnesotans are so much better than this letter. I can't tell you how many friends, like normie friends, I have who aren't political, who I check in on, and they say, Alvaro, you have no idea how bad this is. And Alvaro, I am so proud of my neighbors, and how they're stepping up.
Well, and this is where what has traditionally made America great, was not absurd amounts of wealth in the hands of individuals. It was the communities.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because we're seeing it in Minnesota, but obviously I'm in Iowa. I lived in Chicago. I've kind of seen the Midwest. I told you about my Nebraska connection earlier. Warren Buffett, Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Right. He's had the same house that he bought since like
That
1956 or something like that.
Right.
And he's one of the wealthiest individuals in the world.
Yeah.
And does not flaunt it.
Right.
And So I think if we're going to have a slogan, it should be like, make wealth shameful again. Like, people should feel ashamed to show off their wealth, because like the real strength of America is in the fabric of our communities.
Amen.
It is that response that we're seeing. There was an essay in the Atlantic that I think was very similar to what you're saying, which is about like kind of like the people of Minnesota are showing us exactly what is the best of America.
Yeah.
Right. The best of America is us like showing up for our neighbors, taking care of them. Yeah. And then we can contrast that, right? Like we can contrast that community, that localism, that, people not having that much, but what they do have, they share.
Yeah.
We can contrast that with, say, like the response from Amazon.
Yeah.
To this.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because, and I'm happy to set the stage. I think what you're hearing Max and I talk about is how so many of these companies actively support ICE, right? Or they're just out there to get theirs, and they don't care if what they're doing, lobbying for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act because of the tax breaks in it. They don't care if that flows $170 billion into ICE and CBP coffers. They're indifferent. But I think the other thing that would happen with the Melania documentary and the presence of Andy Jassy, the presence of Tim Cook at this, I'll just say, just really gross screening at the White House the night Alex Preddy was killed in Minneapolis, how it makes this normal. This is what I want to talk about. Like these CEOs acting like everything is fine, putting on black tie, putting on a tuxedo. Like, I want people to sit with this. So the night Alex Preddy was killed, there was a screening of the Melania documentary, at first in the White House. Last night it was screened in the Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center.
Doesn't look weird at all.
It's just embarrassing. But I've worn black tie a couple times in my life. Let me tell you, it takes a lot of work to wear a tuxedo. You have to get on the tuxedo. There's all these things here, and yeah, there you go. The Donald J. Trump and the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center,
just slapping it,
so
slapping
much
it
of this
on
picture
top
is
of it,
just a great, but anyway, so there was this screening at, I can't look at this anymore. Take that.
All right.
So that night, you have Tim Cook going to the White House, right? Mr. Preddy is not in the ground yet. And you have Tim Cook in black tie at the White House, rubbing elbows with the president, rubbing elbows with the first lady, with nice photos, gauzy photos being taken. I'm confident he was, but I don't know whether he was, but I'm sure he wanted to be there if he wasn't. and then you've got Andy Jassy there, of this Amazon paid for
Well,
documentary.
Can I set a little bit
Please,
of the
absolutely.
because right after Trump was elected, I was reading an article about how Melania, like, there was some Mar-a-Lago dinner or whatever where all these CEOs are already trying to like lobby Trump and get in with him. And that, she was basically pitching to all these different like media executives about how she wanted to have this, documentary. And so they were all like falling over themselves to try to get this influence, on her. And what Amazon paid to get this. So this documentary. So first off, documentaries typically don't cost a ton of money.
Right.
Like compared to like a big budget film.
Yeah, it's like a couple million, kind of max.
Yeah, because number one, documentaries tend to not pull in box office draws, right? They don't tend to pull in the money, so you got to keep the costs down low. But not if you're, corrupt Inc., at the White House, where $28 million is how much they're paying Melania,
the first lady, according to the New York Post. That's right.
Yeah, $28 million. I think it was Wall Street Journal actually that confirmed it.
Right?
Yeah, and then the total cost of the film was $40 million, which raised a ton of eyebrows in Hollywood because it's like this is not normal.
Right.
This amount of money for, and then in addition to those in addition to the $40 million, they've spent $35 million. So Amazon is all in $75 million, basically giving a direct $28 million payment to the First Lady of the United States, then spending $35 million to basically promote. My dog is really upset about that. I don't know if you can hear him barking.
As Brennan should be. Brennan is pissed.
Brandeis.
Brandeis. Brandeis is pissed. Brennan would be pissed too.
Yeah, Brandeis would be pissed about this. And, Brandeis's line is that, what is it? It's sunshine is the best disinfectant. We have the sunshine laws.
He's pissed in the background.
Because
That's right.
I have no idea what's going on. Maybe ICE is at my door because I've been criticizing him.
Well, don't joke because, sadly, no,
Hey, Iowa's a stand your ground state.
Ooh, okay, move on, Max. We're gonna pretend you didn't say that because I want you to be nice and alive. Please go ahead.
Okay. So you have this direct payment. Now, people forget the Constitution actually talked about this idea of corruption for the president. There's two clauses in the Constitution that deal with emoluments, which is just kind of a fancy word of saying gifts and like payments. One is in Article 2. That's the domestic emoluments. It's basically that the president shall receive no salary other than what he gets for being the president. And then it prohibits specifically states trying to influence him. Right. But it's like we should certainly be looking at the spirit of that in the Constitution that, so what we're fine with private companies, giving money directly to the president to try to curry favor with him. I think one reason that the founding fathers didn't feel like they had to specifically say that was because the idea of bribery, was something that was looked down upon. But we've essentially legalized bribery in the United States now. So anyway, and then there's one other aspect to this documentary that I just want to point out that I think people should be angry about, which is that not only did the subject matter here where they're trying to, glorify the Trump administration.
I think the Gen Z folks would call it glazing.
Glazing.
It is a glazing of the First Lady and the Trump administration.
You are so much hipper than I am, Alvaro.
I just affirmatively seek out the Gen Z slang. But yes, it's a glazing. It's a glazing. It's a $75 million glazing and a bribe. Yes.
Bribe is another word to use. But the director, Ratner, who they hired, do people not remember who this person is? Like this is
I actually didn't. I didn't.
Yeah,
go ahead.
2017, he was accused of rape. Okay. And then in addition to being accused of rape, he was accused of multiple women in Hollywood coming forward about sexual assault and sexual harassment. Oh, God. One is Elliot Page.
Is that right?
That he apparently outed Elliot Page as being gay, probably because he, this was before they it's him now, but like used to be Ellen. Was it Ellen Page? I even forget what
I'm not sure,
name is.
But right,
but like apparently like he made an advance on him
Page,
that then outed him to the rest of the production, that because he was incensed by being rejected for that reason. So it's like this is an awful human being, an absolutely terrible human being. That so not only is Amazon glazing the president and the first family here, they're also trying to smuggle back into the Hollywood. This guy was blacklisted in Hollywood, and now they've given him a bunch of money, and I think they've greenlighted other projects for him too. So anyway, the rot at Amazon is clear.
And let me just add, the $75 million documentary for the First Lady, where the First Lady profited to the tune of $28 million, was just a part of the Amazon payments into the Trump administration. And then Max and I, had a front seat to where this is going when we were at the Federal Trade Commission. So $75 million was the payment for the documentary. Again, a grotesque sum of money for a documentary, unheard of, right? And the substance of the documentary is actually it helps people understand when this was paid, because this was all recorded in the run-up to the inauguration. So it just couldn't be clearer. You're about to have power. Here's $75 million, in kind or directly. And we want to be on your good side. What else did they do? Amazon gave $1 million the inauguration. They gave millions of dollars to the Trump Golden Ballroom. So did Apple, by the way. And we actually don't know the specific amounts. I've seen suggestions that it's $5 million to kind of be in the elite circles, but I don't know that. Also, Amazon licensed The Apprentice for an undisclosed sum.
Jeez.
And when you put all these things together, it is millions upon millions of dollars that Amazon is sending into the president's pockets. And so what do they get for this? Because we do have to talk about this. What do they get for this? So among other things, Amazon warehouses have an injury rate that is 2 times industry normal. Even they have 150% turnover in a year. And that is a clunky way to say, if you start on an Amazon warehouse on January 1, by December 31, everyone at that warehouse, it's the equivalent of everyone at that warehouse will have left, and then half of the new people will have left as well, because it's so brutal on people. The drivers, the DSP drivers who Amazon claims they don't employ, but who wear Amazon vests, drive Amazon trucks, are told where to go, when to go, how to go by Amazon Inc., right? They have to pee in bottles because they don't have time to take breaks. They also have higher accident rates because they're pushed so fast, so hard. The guy in charge of safety at Amazon during much of this was a guy named David Keeling.
Where is he now?
He's now the head of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
What a
true story, folks. Thing number 1. Thing number 2 is this. On January 20th, Inauguration Day, the Federal Trade Commission, where Max and I were both public servants, was suing Amazon in not one, but 2 separate lawsuits. One of them had to do with how Amazon made it impossibly easy to accidentally subscribe for a Prime subscription, allegedly, and how they allegedly made it extremely hard to get out of it, so much so that when you would click the button that said unsubscribe from Amazon Prime, it would take you into what the company itself allegedly called the Iliad Flow. Now, for those of you who that doesn't ring a bell, that is the Homeric epic about Troy, right? And maybe you can go back to the Brad Pitt movie where he looks awesome. He's doing his macros. He looks great, right? But it was a 14-option, 6-page, basically gauntlet to make it impossible to get out of it. We were suing them in not just that lawsuit, but in a separate lawsuit, alleging that they were bilking the small mom and pop sellers on Amazon of all these fees. They were taking up to 50 cents on every dollar. And the moment those mom and pop sellers on Amazon started offering lower prices than those they offered on Amazon, they would get kicked out of the preferential buy box. And surprise, surprise, what did we allege that did? Raise the prices for everyone. So on January 20th, the United States federal government was suing Andy Jassy, was suing Jeff Bezos, was suing their company Amazon in not one but two federal lawsuits. What has happened since then? Since all those payouts into the Trump administration, one of those two lawsuits has been settled. And the thing
Probably
that jumps
for
out,
pennies on the dollar.
they got so my understanding is they got $1.5 billion, but my understanding is that was
I think it was 2.5
if you read the press release, this FTC says that was the sum total of the harm. And usually what happens is, like, if you harm people to the tune of $1.5 billion, which is what the press release says, you recover more than that, right? But here's the thing that really people need to know is that the Amazon executives who were charged with allegedly facilitating this scheme were not fined, were not demoted, didn't suffer a single ding, didn't have to pay a penny out of their own pockets, weren't subject to any monitoring. They got off with what Matt Stoller called, the equivalent of an Amazon gift card, right? And so, and now the federal government isn't still involved in this other lawsuit. And this is the context of what's happening. This is why Amazon executive Andy Jassy is appearing at this Milani documentary the night Alex Preddy is killed.
Even those regulatory actions aside,
yeah,
that they have an interest in making sure that they're friends with the decision makers, about that regulatory action. The one big beautiful bill gave them a huge tax cut, right?
Yeah,
I saw it was like $15 billion.
Yeah.
That Amazon got a tax cut on with the one big beautiful bill. Like that's, it's like, then you're talking about just good business, right? It's like, oh, well, we give $1 million here. We give Melania $28 million over here. You spend $75 million promoting or $35 million for the marketing of Melania. We're giving all these pennies on the dollar, right? For how much they're getting in tax from this administration.
And also Amazon, go ahead.
No, I you were mentioning the gauntlet. And one thing, Amanda and I made the decision to cancel our Prime membership this week. Seeing it was actually seeing Jassy when Alex Preddy was shot, and seeing the pictures from the Melania premiere and all that. Then
I
I'm
actually didn't see a photo of him there. It's
no, it wasn't a photo, but I think it was a photo of him. It was articles, but it was like that he was there at this,
he was present,
black tie event at the White House on the day that Preddy was shot, murdered. I'm just gonna say it because I've watched those videos multiple times. I know exactly what that was. That was an execution of an individual. But anyway, decided to cancel it. Well, and Amanda was just telling me last night that she's getting all of these you should cancel your Prime membership for no other reason so that they throw you a bunch of new deals.
Oh, right? Really?
Yeah. No, because it's it's hard enough to actually get to the cancel, but then when you do it and say we're done, right? Then they start sending you a bunch of emails of well, now you can come back for half price. Now you can come back, so it's like, hey, look, if you can't, live without Prime, which I gotta say, we got problems.
Yeah.
We got problems if we cannot punish the companies who are making our lives painful.
Yeah.
Right? We have major problems as a democracy, as a republic. We will lose the republic unless we are willing to do the bare minimum, which is just to tell Amazon to fuck off. And but anyway, so do it. But if you can't do it because it's the principled right thing to do, at least do it so that they start throwing some deals at you, and it it increases statistics that say that people canceled their Prime.
Are trying to cancel.
Yeah.
For me, zooming out, Max, what is really clear to me is one of the most toxic things this president has done is look at people suffering in this country and say, who's doing this to you? That guy down the street, your neighbor, who is an immigrant. That's the reason your wages are low. That's the reason you can't find a job. That's the reason your rent is high. We're going to mass deport that guy out of here. And the thing that people need to understand is that you're not going to deport your way out of a rigged economy. You deport the construction worker down the street, that guy's job isn't going to suddenly start paying benefits. It's not suddenly going to start paying overtime and unemployment insurance. The rent on that guy's apartment isn't going to suddenly not have all this junk fees in it for, having no cockroaches in your building. The landlord, the corporate landlord for that apartment isn't going to stop using rent fixing software that systematically increases the rent on everyone. This is all a show. And unless law enforcement at the state and federal level actually start investigating the employers who pretend that their employees are independent contractors, actually start cracking down on the way landlords treat people in this country, none of this is going to change. But you know who is getting rich? The Deloittes of the world, the Palantirs of the world, the LexisNexuses of the world, the Thomson Reuters of the world. All of these companies that are seeing actual direct contracts or seeing tax breaks because they supported our path to ICE getting $170 billion. People are getting rich, and these deportations are not going to make people's lives better. They are a distraction.
And that's not trickling down. Can we dispel the myth that, neoliberals have tried to sell to the American people, which is that tax cuts mean more jobs for Americans? Because Amazon, lobbied hard to get all this preferential treatment from the administration. They spent, they had enough money to spend on bribery of the administration. But then, and they got their $15 billion tax cut. Did they expand their workforce? No. In the last few months, they have announced 30,000 layoffs. Yeah. And I read...
And 16,000 came down, I think, the last 48 hours.
16,000, in the last 20...
Of the 30, yeah.
Right, and then 14,000 before. Yes. And I was there was an account, I think it was called like the Job Girl or something like that, like follows like firings and layoffs and all that. And I mean, just absolutely disgusting things that they did. There were reports that the people who were let go were approaching a vesting date. Oh, God. Right? So that it's like the motivation for it was actually, it's like, we don't want to have to like let them vest in, stock options or retirement benefits or anything like that. So we're going to cut this group, out so that we don't have that obligation. Yeah. And it's that greed. It's that, this is malfeasance. We were talking a little bit about how, kind of the Minnesota ethic, right? And people trying to have a more egalitarian, all that. But we also, back in the 1960s in America, we had a theory of the firm that was a lot more egalitarian. Yeah. And the idea was that you did sustained growth as a company, and you did it taking care of your employees. One of the best books that I ever read was The Man Who Destroyed Capitalism. And it's about Jack Welch. And Jack Welch has been held up as this, titan of Wall Street and all of that. The man who destroyed capitalism. And it was because he took GE, a company that actually believed in taking care of its employees. People would get a job fresh out of, undergrad. Right. And they would spend their whole career at GE, in the GE management program or, whatever. And they would have very solid middle class lives. And what Jack Welch did was just extract all of that value out of that company. And that became then the model for Wall Street, is that these companies are about extracting value, essentially suppressing the wages to all the employees, taking away from them as much as possible, making it closer to like indentured servitude, making it closer to slavery. I mean, I acknowledge that's hyperbole, right? But certainly when we talk, you talk all the time about the Amazon warehouses and the conditions of that. This is not a company that should be respected.
I'm glad you said that, and I'm also glad you used the word greed. And let me just say, I used to also not use that word. I used to not use that word before I went into the Federal Trade Commission, before I became a commissioner, because I think I had a certain vision of companies where they were like, yeah, there's some bad apples, there's some good apples, and I don't want to use such a strong word in the context of these companies. And let me just say, and I'm honestly, I find it really sad. When I went into FTC, the thing that you start seeing is you start reading the text messages, and the memos and the documents. And I'm not going to describe any
careful.
substance to them.
Be careful.
No, yeah. I'm not describing any substance. But when you are in law enforcement, you see, you look under the hood. And what I saw makes me want to use that word. Because what you see, again, I'm not talking about any company, but just a broad pattern, is too many corporate executives understanding that what they're going to do is going to hurt their customer, is going to defraud people, is going to crush the competition, not by outcompeting them, but by tilting the playing field, doing something unfair, and they just do it anyways. And it really changed the way I look at billionaire companies for the worse. And honestly, it made me look at small business in a completely different light. Because what I saw when I looked at small businesses, when I would visit them in person with you, with Catherine, with other people on our team, is people who were plugged into the day-to-day of their communities, who would be comfortable with a narrower margin if it meant making sure their neighbors got fed. How many times did we meet with grocers who said like, oh yeah, I'm doling out gift certificates the second half of the month because people run out of money. And I think it's important people use that word. And I know members of Congress who say like, the CPC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, just launched a subcommittee on corporate greed. And, I heard some of them say like, I wouldn't use this word before, but this is what my constituents say, because that's how you experience it. You experience it as greed. Yeah. So,
well,
I'm sorry, that's
can I just make it's so funny to me because, I get accused all the time of not understanding economics, but I think I actually understand it better than a lot of the people that have PhDs in it.
Yeah.
Because look, when you concentrate wealth, we just saw those statistics about that for like the first time in American history, like the upper 5% or whatever are responsible for like the majority of spending.
Yeah.
It's called the K-shaped economy,
Yeah.
right? Which is essentially that more and more of consumer spending is done by a smaller and smaller, wealthy portion of the population. But it's like when we have greed at the top, when we have concentration of wealth at the top, you actually are inhibiting economic progress in this country. Because the more that wealth is spread out among the people, the more that people have disposable income, that means new businesses that get started. That means, your neighbors actually have more money circulating in the community because you have more disposable income that you are spending. And, so this idea is called trickle out economics. And we got to get rid of this idea of trickle down economics and start thinking about trickle out. And the best way that we have trickle out is when more of the capital in the, that results from the productivity of this country goes to the more of the Americans that are participating in that productivity rather than a few at the top.
Yeah. And so, as we wrap this live, I do want to reiterate, I think there's a lot of darkness right now. A lot of people don't have a lot of hope. And that's that Mr. Rogers saying, look for the helpers. The helpers are not going to be these billionaire publicly traded companies. The helpers are your neighbor, and the helper is a small business down the street who is relentlessly focused on making sure people have their groceries, making sure people are supported. And so that is the bright spot here. It is how regular people of all political stripes, and I'm sure you've seen the videos out of Minneapolis, you have a lot of Republicans, people on the right, independents saying, look, I'm not a political person, but this cannot be our country. This is completely un-American. That is, I think, what people need to sit with and remind themselves. So Max, before we log off, I'd love to do another plug for excellent. Thank you. So folks,
I was ready that time.
I'm sure we have some folks on right now that weren't on at the start of the show. Just as a reminder, Max and I are launching a new podcast called The Fair Fight with Max and Alvaro. What you're seeing right now is our lives. We do these periodically at drive time, 8:45 Eastern, 7:45 Central, to talk about everything that's been happening day to day. But what we're working on right now in the background are some pilots modeled off of Car Talk with Click and Clack, the Tapper Brothers, where you call in with your questions and they give you practical advice. And we want to do that for the messed up economy. The next pilot we're doing in the run-up to Valentine's Day is about social media and AI chatbots. People would be shocked and surprised at the number of teenagers, young adults think they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend in an AI chatbot. There's research out there, where people literally say, "I married my chatbot. I have a child with these chatbots." These are run by for-profit companies. This is not headed to someplace good. If you are a mom, if you are a dad, if you are a young person, and you have a question about the effect of this technology on you, on your brain development, on your mental health, on your health in general, send us that question. Call 920-WE-FIGHT, 920-933-4448, or just leave us a question at thefairfightpod.com. This information is on your screen. We have one of the nation's, if not the nation's, top expert on youth development around this technology, around social media, and around chatbots, Dr. Jenny Radeski of the University of Michigan, who is going to answer your questions about all this stuff. We are going to tape that in a pilot, which we will release. And so again, you have questions about the effect of AI chatbots and social media on your kid, on your teen, on you. We have one of the nation's top experts who, by the way, was the first pediatrician ever hired at the Federal Trade Commission. Danielle and our team, we hired Dr. Radeski, and we are able to, that's how we started getting smart about all this stuff. And so in other words, we have one of the brightest lights on this stuff who's going to answer your questions. Please submit them, 920-WE-FIGHT, 920-933-4448, or thefairfightpod.com. We hope to have that pilot out soon.
And just so people know, you can always shoot us an email too. We are at ask@thefairfightpod.com. You can ask us a question. You can tell us your story. We may choose to read it on the air, your question. But no, really, really proud of the fact that we now have a telephone number.
Yes.
We got the SpeakPipe link that you can just leave an audio recording. You can always leave these things anonymously, folks.
Yes.
It's like, if you don't feel comfortable, I don't want you to feel like you have to reveal who you are.
Yes.
Leave us a question. We want to hear from you. And we're trying to incorporate this into a regular podcast, answering questions, making sure that you have, information that you need to be active in this fight against corporate power.
Yes.
So,
all right,
Alvaro, have a great Friday.
You too, man.
Thank you for everybody who was listening, and feel free to follow us on Twitter. We're actually now on Upscrolled. At least Alvaro and I are both on Upscrolled.
I started the account.
If you started that, and I'll create a Fair Fight account too for Upscrolled. So, thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday.